Time at rest, exploring the past, slowly. It is easy to forget how temporary the world truly is. Coastlines seem fixed, mountains appear eternal, and yet, across the long sweep of Earth's history, nothing remains unchanged for very long. Let's journey back, not just thousands of years, but millions. Back to a time when ice ruled the land, when seas withdrew from the continents, and when North America was still waiting for its first human footsteps. Before continuing, we extend an invitation to those who wish to support this channel and the work that goes into creating long-form documentaries like this one. Subscribing, leaving a like, or sharing a comment may seem simple, but each of these actions helps make it possible to continue exploring the deep history of humanity and the ancient story of the planet we all share. Let us know in the comments where in the world you are tuning in from and what time it is for you as this journey begins. Together, we'll step back through deep time, tracing the long and often subtle forces that have shaped humanity and the world it inhabits, and begin our exploration of the past. Long before the continent bore cities, roads, or any human settlements, North America existed as a vast, untamed expanse, sculpted by the slow but relentless forces of ice and wind. During the Pleistocene epoch, which began approximately 2.6 million years ago, glaciers advanced and retreated in massive cycles, reshaping mountains, valleys, and plains. These frozen rivers, miles thick in some regions, dictated the distribution of flora and fauna and established the ecological framework of the continent for millennia. The Laurentide ice sheet was the most formidable of these glacial formations, covering nearly all of Canada and extending into the northern United States. Its surface gleamed under pale sunlight, reflecting light in muted shades across frozen landscapes. Ice exerted immense pressure on the bedrock below, grinding mountains, smoothing valleys, and carving basins that would later fill with lakes. Moraines, composed of rocks and soil, pushed along by the advancing ice, marked the slow progression of these glaciers over vast distances. In some regions, drumlins, smooth, elongated hills formed beneath the ice, revealed the paths of its centuries-long flow. Despite the cold and immensity of the ice, life flourished along the margins. Tundra stretched for hundreds of miles, populated by grasses, mosses, and hardy shrubs capable of surviving frost and snow. These plants formed dense mats, insulating the ground and providing food for the massive herbivores that roamed the plains. Forests persisted in areas beyond the ice sheet, dominated by conifers and low-lying deciduous trees adapted to short growing seasons. The distribution of vegetation was dynamic, responding to climatic shifts and the advance or retreat of ice, creating a patchwork of habitats across the continent. Among these habitats, megafauna dominated the landscape. Woolly mammoths, with thick shaggy coats and long curved tusks, roamed in herds, grazing on the coarse tundra grasses that survived the bitter cold. Mastodons, slightly smaller but equally imposing, inhabited the forested regions near the ice's edge, browsing shrubs and low branches. Saber-toothed cats and dire wolves prowled the margins, employing stealth, speed, and cooperative hunting strategies to catch prey. Giant ground sloths and short-faced bears added further diversity, their presence shaping the ecological balance. Every species played a role in the finely tuned web of life that persisted despite extreme climatic conditions. The physical environment imposed unique challenges. Ice-covered rivers froze for months, limiting access to water and reshaping animal migration patterns. Winds swept across open plains, carrying snow in drifts that altered the terrain and influenced plant growth. Seasonal shifts were extreme, with long, harsh winters and brief, intense summers. Ice and snow not only shaped the landscape, but also dictated the movement, behavior, and survival strategies of all living creatures, including humans, who arrived later in this icy world. Humans, small in number but highly adaptable, began to colonize North America during the later stages of the Pleistocene. They mastered tools made of stone, bone, and antler, which enabled them to hunt effectively, prepare food, and construct shelters. Fire became essential, providing warmth, protection from predators, and a means to cook and preserve food. Early humans tracked animal migrations, identified safe travel routes, and developed strategies to endure cold, resource-scarce environments. Their presence was subtle but significant, adding a layer of complexity to an already dynamic ecosystem. Hydrology was heavily influenced by glacial activity. Meltwater streams carved new channels through ice and soil, feeding rivers and forming lakes that would endure long after glaciers receded. Lakes formed in depressions scoured by moving ice, such as the basins that became the Great Lakes. Seasonal melting caused flooding, redistributing nutrients and shaping soils in ways that promoted plant growth once the ice withdrew. Even subterranean watercourses beneath glaciers influenced surface hydrology, creating springs and wetlands that nurtured life at the ice's margins. The glaciers themselves were not static monoliths. They advanced and retreated in response to long-term climate cycles. During glacial maxima, ice extended far south, covering regions that are now temperate or subtropical. During interglacial periods, ice melted, landscapes transformed, and ecosystems shifted in response. This dynamic created a constantly evolving environment, forcing species to adapt or perish. Animals developed migratory patterns, hibernation strategies, and social behaviors to survive these fluctuations. Humans relied on knowledge of these patterns to plan hunting, gathering, and settlement strategies. The frozen continent also bore dramatic geological features. Crevasses, formed by stress and moving ice, created deep fissures across glacial surfaces. Ice caves formed in sheltered regions, carved by meltwater over centuries. Reflective ice surfaces altered local temperature and light patterns, creating shimmering landscapes that changed throughout the day. The constant interplay of ice, wind, and sun produced dynamic, living environments that challenged life and forced adaptation on every scale. North America's Pleistocene ecosystems were interdependent and resilient. Predators balanced prey populations, herbivores maintained vegetation patterns, and plants adapted to both soil and climatic conditions. Even in extreme cold, life persisted. The Ice Age was a period of both destruction and renewal. Glaciers destroyed forests and reshaped rivers, but also created fertile valleys and basins, depositing mineral-rich soil that would support future growth. In contemplating this frozen continent, it becomes clear that the Pleistocene world was both harsh and majestic. The rhythm of ice, wind, and life created a complex, interconnected system in which survival required constant adaptation, keen observation, and endurance. Every glacier, every snow-covered plain, and every valley carved by ice tells the story of a continent dominated by frozen power, yet teeming with life at its edges. This was the North America of the Ice Age, fast, silent, and enduring. A landscape of extremes shaped by forces as ancient as time itself. The glaciers of the Ice Age were immense forces of nature, slow yet unstoppable, sculpting the North American continent over millennia. They were not simple sheets of ice, they were rivers in motion, flowing inexorably from highlands where snow accumulated, grinding against rock, carrying debris, and reshaping mountains, valleys, and plains. The Laurentide ice sheet, alone, stretched across millions of square kilometers, its movement slow enough to seem frozen, yet powerful enough to transform landscapes on a continental scale. Glacial advance was gradual but relentless. Layers of accumulated snow compressed into dense ice, pressing downward and outward, flowing under gravity's inexorable pull. As ice thickened, It exerted tremendous pressure on the bedrock beneath, eroding hills, carving valleys, and creating basins that would eventually fill with meltwater. Moraines, composed of debris carried along by the moving ice, formed ridges marking the ice's maximum reach. Drumlins, smooth elongated hills shaped beneath glacial weight, indicated the direction of ice movement, providing a geological record of these ancient processes. The impact of glaciers on rivers and water systems was profound. Meltwater from the ice sheet carved channels, fed rivers, and created temporary lakes. Some rivers were forced to change course entirely as glaciers advanced, while others were dammed, forming vast shallow bodies of water. Subglacial streams flowed beneath the ice, invisible yet potent, slowly eroding bedrock and shaping the terrain over centuries. Seasonal variations caused flooding when ice dams broke, redistributing sediment, enriching soils, and providing new opportunities for plant growth once the ice receded. These processes created fertile ground that would sustain flora and fauna long after the glaciers vanished. Glaciers advanced and retreated in response to long-term climate cycles. During glacial maxima, ice sheets extended far south, covering regions that today are temperate or even subtropical. Interglacial periods brought warmer temperatures, ice melt, and shifts in ecosystems. These cycles forced plants and animals to adapt continually. Species evolved migratory patterns, hibernation strategies, and social behaviors in response to environmental changes. The movement of glaciers influenced vegetation patterns, with tundra and steppe vegetation dominating ice-free areas, while forests expanded into warmer zones as ice receded. The margin of the glacier was a region of constant change, where life had to be flexible and observant. Herbivores such as mammoths grazed along the ice edge, seeking vegetation in newly exposed terrain. Mastodons inhabited forested areas beyond the ice, browsing shrubs and low-hanging branches. Smaller herbivores moved cautiously, adjusting to new grazing patterns, while predators like saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and giant short-faced bears adapted to the shifting distribution of prey. Every organism was subject to the influence of glacial movement, creating a dynamic and interdependent ecosystem. The glaciers themselves created distinctive geological features. Crevasses, formed by stress within the ice, created fissures that marked the glacier's surface. Ice caves formed over centuries as meltwater carved tunnels beneath the ice. The reflective surface of the glaciers altered local temperatures, reflecting sunlight and influencing wind patterns. Snowfields at higher elevations acted as reservoirs, slowly releasing water to surrounding plains, sustaining vegetation and wildlife along the ice margin. Even minor changes in ice thickness or movement could redirect streams, alter sediment deposition, and reshape valleys over long periods. Human populations, though small, adapted to life alongside these massive glaciers. Early humans tracked animal migrations along ice margins, timed hunting with seasonal shifts, and navigated landscapes that were continually transformed. They relied on stone, bone, and antler tools for hunting and processing food, used fire for warmth and protection, and constructed shelters suited to harsh, frozen conditions. Understanding the patterns of glacial advance and retreat allowed humans to exploit resources efficiently, ensuring survival in an environment dominated by forces far greater than themselves. The glaciers had a direct impact on climate, both locally and regionally. Ice sheets reflected sunlight, cooling adjacent regions and influencing atmospheric circulation. Cold, dense air flowed down from glaciers, creating katabatic winds that shaped snow distribution, vegetation patterns, and animal movements. The seasonal melting and freezing of ice also influenced humidity, precipitation, and the formation of clouds, indirectly affecting ecosystems far beyond the immediate glacial boundary. The glaciers were simultaneously sculptors of the land and regulators of climate, exerting influence over life across vast areas. The ecological effects of glaciers extended to the distribution of plants and animals. As ice advanced, tundra and steppe vegetation followed the receding ice, creating corridors of forage for herbivores. Forests were displaced or fragmented, forcing animals to migrate or adapt to new habitats. Predators followed herbivore movements, establishing complex food webs that shifted with every glacial advance or retreat. Species that could adapt to these cyclical changes survived, while those unable to cope with rapid environmental shifts faced extinction. Over millennia, the glaciers transformed North America into a landscape dominated by ice, yet life persisted at the edges. Plants colonized newly exposed soil, herbivores adapted to sparse vegetation, and predators adjusted to changing prey populations. Human ingenuity allowed early populations to navigate these frozen lands, exploiting the ecological patterns created by the ice. In every valley, along every river and plain, the glacier left its mark, influencing the course of evolution and survival across the continent. The legacy of the glaciers is still visible today. Lakes, rivers, valleys, and ridges carry the imprint of ice that moved slowly yet inexorably across the land. Moraines and drumlins reveal the direction of flow, while soil deposits reflect the grinding and erosion of rock beneath ice. Glacial meltwater fed the formation of major waterways, influenced the distribution of forests, and shaped ecosystems that persist into the modern era. The rhythm of ice advance and retreat dictated the survival strategies of countless species, including humans, and left behind a continent permanently altered by frozen forces. In the quiet expanse of a glacial margin, one can imagine the interplay of ice, water, plants, and animals, each responding to the slow, persistent movements of the glaciers. The landscape is both harsh and breathtaking, shaped by the immense power of ice, yet sustaining intricate networks of life at its edges. The march of the glaciers was a defining force in North America, one that created, destroyed, and reshaped, leaving a legacy that endures in every frozen ridge, every valley, and every river that traces the path of ancient ice. North America during the Ice Age was dominated by a remarkable assembly of megafauna, species of extraordinary size and resilience, perfectly adapted to life in cold, often unforgiving environments. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats roamed the continent, each fulfilling a specific ecological role. Their presence shaped the landscapes they inhabited, influencing vegetation, predator-prey dynamics, and even the movements and survival strategies of early humans. Woolly mammoths were among the most iconic of these giants. Covered in thick, shaggy fur and insulated with dense undercoats, they were well adapted to survive harsh winters and bitter winds. Their long, curved tusks were not only tools for feeding, stripping bark from trees, and clearing snow, but also powerful weapons used in contests for dominance within herds. Herds traveled across tundra and steppe, their massive footprints compressing snow and soil, creating patterns that influenced the paths of smaller animals. The movement of mammoth herds shaped the distribution of vegetation, as they grazed selectively, trimming grasses and shrubs, allowing certain plants to flourish while suppressing others. Ethics, salson, diamond, cow, mastodons, slightly smaller but no less impressive, inhabited forested regions along the ice margins. Unlike mammoths, which grazed primarily on open tundra grasses, mastodons browsed trees and shrubs, feeding on leaves, twigs, and branches. The feeding habits contributed to forest dynamics, influencing tree growth patterns and creating openings in dense woodland that allowed smaller plants to thrive. Mastodons were solitary or traveled in smaller groups compared to the large herds of mammoths, and their presence in the ecosystem complemented that of other herbivores, maintaining balance across diverse habitats. Predators of the Ice Age were equally specialized. Saber-toothed cats, with their elongated canines and robust forelimbs, were apex hunters capable of taking down large prey, such as mammoths and bison. Their hunting strategies relied on ambush, patience, and the element of surprise, targeting young, old, or weakened individuals. Direwolves, Slightly smaller but highly social, hunted in coordinated packs, using intelligence and teamwork to bring down prey. The presence of multiple predator species created a complex web of interactions, where competition and opportunity dictated survival. Giant short-faced bears were another formidable predator, capable of both hunting and scavenging, exerting pressure across multiple trophic levels. Beyond the large herbivores and predators, smaller mammals and birds contributed to the ecosystem's richness. Foxes, hares, and other small mammals evolved physiological adaptations to cope with extreme cold, including thick fur, burrowing behaviors, and changes in reproductive timing. Birds, particularly migratory species, adjusted their routes to exploit short summers and abundant food in tundra and steppe regions. Even insects played subtle, yet essential roles in pollination, decomposition, and the food chain, demonstrating the interconnectedness of life in Ice Age America. The ecology of these giants was intertwined with the land itself. Mammoths preferred open steppe environments, which provided abundant grasses and allowed visibility to detect predators. Mastodons favored forested areas near water sources, where browsing materials were plentiful. Predators adapted their territories and hunting strategies to these distributions, following herds and exploiting environmental features such as cliffs, river crossings, and snowdrifts. Seasonal cycles dictated movement, reproduction, and survival. In spring, herbivores sought fresh vegetation, while predators timed reproduction to coincide with periods of prey abundance. In winter, snow cover and ice thickness limited movement and feeding, forcing adaptations such as food caching, migration, or social huddling. Glacial landscapes also influenced animal behavior. Moraines, drumlins, and glacial lakes created barriers and corridors for migration. Ice-covered rivers limited access to water, while meltwater streams provided essential hydration and habitats for fish and aquatic plants. The glaciers' advance and retreat shaped the distribution of plant communities, which in turn dictated the location and abundance of herbivores. These cascading effects created intricate ecological networks, where the presence or absence of one species could ripple across the landscape, affecting predator populations, plant growth, and the strategies of early humans. Human interactions with these giants were significant, even if early populations were relatively small. Early humans studied the behavior, movement, and feeding patterns of mammoths and other megafauna, developing sophisticated hunting techniques. Tools made of stone, bone, and antler were adapted for processing large animals, while fire and shelters provided protection in harsh climates. Humans also influenced animal populations indirectly, through selective hunting and the creation of temporary camps that altered the distribution of resources. This subtle interaction demonstrates the complex interdependency between humans and megafauna in the Pleistocene ecosystem. The life histories of these giants were shaped by climate. Prolonged winters required energy conservation strategies, such as reduced activity or reliance on fat reserves. Reproductive cycles were timed to ensure the survival of young during periods of abundance. Herd structures provided protection against predators and allowed knowledge transfer between generations. Mortality patterns, including predation, disease, and harsh weather, influenced population dynamics, ensuring that only the most resilient individuals survived to reproduce. Vegetation and geological features played crucial roles in megafauna survival. Tundra grasses, sedges, and mosses provided essential nutrients for grazing herbivores. Forested patches near glacial margins offered shelter, browsing material, and protection from extreme winds. River valleys and floodplains supported a variety of plants, creating microhabits that allowed species to survive, even during glacial maxima. These ecosystems were dynamic, shifting with each advance and retreat of the ice, requiring constant adaptation from all organisms. The interconnectedness of the Ice Age ecosystem is evident in the feedback loops between species and environment. Large herbivores shaped vegetation, which influenced predator strategies. predators controlled herbivore populations, indirectly affecting plant distribution. Humans introduced additional complexity, hunting strategically and responding to the availability of resources. Glacial movements continuously altered the landscape, changing water flow, soil deposition, and habitat availability. Each element of this system was part of an elaborate, interdependent network, demonstrating the sophistication and resilience of Ice Age life. By the end of the Pleistocene, these giants would leave an enduring legacy. Fossil records, preserved in soil and ice, reveal the anatomical adaptations, migratory patterns, and social behaviors of these extraordinary creatures. Even as many species vanished due to climate change and human impact, their influence on ecosystems persisted, shaping vegetation patterns, predator-prey dynamics, and soil development. The story of the giants of the Ice Age is one of adaptation, survival, and a profound interplay between life and a frozen, ever-changing environment. The megafauna of Ice Age North America were not merely creatures of immense size, they were architects of their own ecosystems. Mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, and other species created and maintained complex ecological structures, influencing plant distribution, animal movement, and human strategy. Their presence defined the rhythms of life, demonstrating that even in extreme environments, evolution produced highly specialized and resilient forms of life, capable of surviving in a world of ice, wind, and ever-shifting landscapes. The glaciers of North America did more than blanket the land in ice. They created and transformed the continent's waterways, leaving behind a network of rivers, streams, lakes, and wetlands that defined the Pleistocene landscape. Meltwater from the edges of ice sheets carved valleys and channels, shaping the terrain over millennia. Glacial rivers carried not only water but also vast amounts of sediment, rocks, and organic material, slowly altering soil composition and providing foundation for future ecosystems. Rivers originating from glacial melt were dynamic systems. During warmer seasons, accelerated melting increased flow, causing seasonal floods that reshaped riverbanks and floodplains. Channels were constantly shifting as ice advanced and retreated, creating a mosaic of aquatic habitats. Some rivers were swift and turbulent, cutting deep into bedrock, while others meandered lazily across plains, depositing fine sediment that nourished vegetation. These waterways were lifelines for plants and animals alike, forming corridors of nourishment and shelter along the frozen margins. Glacial lakes formed in depressions carved by advancing ice. Some were vast and deep, holding water accumulated over centuries of melting. Others were shallow and ephemeral, appearing as temporary ponds during warmer months and freezing completely in winter. The lakes provided habitats for fish, amphibians, and aquatic invertebrates, forming crucial elements of the food chain. Birds and mammals relied on these water sources for sustenance and breeding, while herbivores grazed nearby on nutrient-rich vegetation nourished by glacial sediment. The distribution of water shaped both flora and fauna. Tundra grasses and sedges flourished along riverbanks and lake shores, while shrubs and conifers found footholds in nutrient-rich soils beyond the ice. Herbivores such as mammoths, mastodons, and caribou followed the flow of rivers to access fresh water and vegetation. Predators adapted to these patterns, using waterways as hunting grounds or territorial boundaries. Rivers also served as travel routes for both animals and humans, guiding migrations and influencing settlement patterns. Meltwater rivers were influenced not only by temperature, but also by glacial structure. Channels beneath ice sheets carried water that sometimes traveled unseen, flowing through subterranean tunnels before emerging downstream. These hidden currents shaped valleys and carved channels that were later visible when the ice receded. The combination of surface and subglacial flow created complex hydrological networks, supporting a variety of habitats along their course. Seasonal fluctuations in water availability forced species to adapt. plants and animals synchronized their growth, reproduction, and foraging behavior with the rhythm of water flow, creating a finely tuned ecological balance. The rivers also shaped the landscape through erosion and deposition. Strong currents eroded bedrock, cutting deep valleys and transporting debris downstream. Floodplains were gradually built up with silt and sand, creating fertile areas that would support future vegetation once the glaciers retreated. River terraces formed as glaciers melted and water levels receded, leaving behind layered soils that recorded the history of glacial advance and retreat. These geological features provided insight into the scale and duration of glacial processes, showing how ice and water sculpted the continent over thousands of years. Human populations were deeply influenced by these waterways. Early inhabitants relied on rivers for drinking water, fishing, and navigation. River corridors guided seasonal movements, provided access to raw materials, and offered protection in an otherwise harsh environment. Understanding the timing of seasonal floods, ice melt, and water flow was crucial for survival. Humans developed tools and strategies for fishing, hunting near riverbanks, and processing plant and animal resources available in these aquatic habitats. The presence of rivers allowed small communities to persist even during extreme climatic conditions. Glacial rivers and lakes also created microhabitats that supported diverse ecosystems. Wetlands formed in low-lying areas, providing shelter for birds, amphibians, and small mammals. Nutrient-rich sediments supported rapid plant growth during brief summers, which in turn sustained herbivores and the predators that hunted them. Seasonal ice cover limited water access in winter, forcing organisms to adapt to scarcity. Some fish species survived beneath frozen surfaces, while mammals relied on stored fat, hibernation, or migration to cope with reduced availability of food in water. The movement of rivers interacted with glaciers in complex ways. Ice dams could block streams, forming temporary lakes that, upon collapse, released sudden floods, reshaping landscapes downstream. Meltwater scoured valleys, deposited new soil layers, and altered vegetation patterns. These interactions between ice, water, and terrain created dynamic environments where ecosystems were continually in flux. The constant remodeling of land and water required species to adapt continuously or relocate, emphasizing the delicate balance between environmental change and survival. Even the smallest details of rivers influenced life. Sediment composition affected the type of vegetation that could grow along banks. Flow rate determined the distribution of aquatic species. Water temperature, influenced by glacial proximity, dictated breeding cycles for fish and amphibians. These subtle variables, combined with the broader climatic and geological context, created a rich tapestry of habitats supporting life at multiple scales. The complexity of these waterways underscores the interconnectedness of Ice Age ecosystems, where water was not merely a resource, but a defining element of survival and ecological structure. Over time, glacial rivers contributed to the long-term shaping of North America. Valleys deepened, floodplains formed, and lakes left behind by retreating ice persisted, creating enduring ecological niches. Sediment deposits from glacial melt enriched soils, providing the foundation for forests, grasslands, and wetlands in subsequent millennia. Rivers also facilitated human migration and settlement, guiding movement across the continent and providing a steady source of resources in an otherwise challenging environment. The rhythm of ice and water defined the pace of life. Seasonal melt dictated plant growth, herbivore movement, and predator strategies. Humans, observing these patterns, timed their activities to exploit periods of abundance. Even in the absence of permanent settlements, rivers and lakes provided continuity and structure to the landscape. anchoring ecosystems in an otherwise shifting and unpredictable environment. The intricate relationship between glaciers, rivers, and life demonstrates the profound influence of water in shaping Ice Age North America. The rivers of ice and water were not merely geographical features, they were dynamic systems that shaped the behavior, distribution, and survival of countless species. Their course was determined by the slow advance of glaciers, seasonal melting, and the interplay of terrain and climate. Vegetation, herbivores, predators, and humans all adapted to these shifting waterways, forming an interconnected network of life. The legacy of these rivers is visible today in North America's major waterways, valleys, and floodplains, reflecting the enduring power of glacial processes to shape the land and the life it supports. The Pleistocene world of North America was defined by extremes of cold, wind, and ice. Survival in such a harsh environment required extraordinary adaptation. Every organism, from the smallest moss to the largest mammoth, evolved strategies to endure freezing temperatures, seasonal scarcity of food, and the relentless advance of glaciers. Life in the Ice Age was a continuous negotiation with the elements, demanding resilience, ingenuity, and an intimate understanding of the environment. Plants formed the foundation of survival. Tundra grasses, mosses, and sedges were remarkably hardy, capable of enduring prolonged frost and desiccating winds. Their low-lying forms protected root systems from freezing, while dense mats preserved moisture and nutrients. Shrubs and coniferous trees, though limited in distribution near the ice, adapted to short growing seasons and nutrient-poor soils. Some conifers produced resin-rich needles that resisted frost damage, while others developed flexible branches to shed snow. These adaptations allowed plants to maintain photosynthesis even under challenging conditions, providing essential sustenance for herbivores and, indirectly, predators. Herbivores evolved a variety of strategies to cope with the cold and scarce food. Woolly mammoths developed thick, layered coats with dense underfur and long outer hair, insulating them against bitter winds. Their massive tusks were not only defensive weapons, but also tools for foraging beneath snow, stripping bark, and accessing plant material buried by ice. Mastodons, while less specialized for open tundra, relied on browsing shrubs and trees. Their molars adapted for grinding tough foliage. Caribou and other ungulates migrated seasonally, moving between snow-free tundras in summer and sheltered valleys in winter, following the availability of forage. Predators, too, exhibited remarkable adaptation. Saber-toothed cats evolved elongated canines and strong forelimbs, optimized for ambushing and immobilizing large prey under frozen conditions. Dire wolves, traveling in packs, leveraged cooperative hunting to exploit herds that were weakened or trapped by snow and ice. Even smaller carnivores, such as foxes, developed insulating fur and hunting strategies that allowed them to persist when prey was sparse. Ice Age predators adapted not only physiologically, but behaviorally, exploiting patterns in herbivore movements, snow cover, and glacial terrain to optimize their survival. Behavioral adaptation was as crucial as physical traits. Animals timed breeding cycles to coincide with periods of food abundance, ensuring that young had the best chance of survival. Herd behaviors, such as grouping in open tundra, offered protection against predators and provided social learning opportunities, transmitting knowledge of migration routes, feeding grounds, and shelter locations. Seasonal movements were guided by the shifting availability of vegetation and water, which were in turn shaped by glacial advance and retreat. This constant interplay between climate, landscape, and behavior defined the rhythm of life in the Ice Age. Humans displayed extraordinary adaptability in the face of cold, resource-scarce environments. They developed clothing from animal hides, often layered and sewn with bone or antler needles to maximize insulation. Fire was not merely a source of warmth, but a tool for cooking, protection, and social organization. Early humans learned to construct shelters from wood, bone, and ice, adapting to seasonal conditions and local resources. Knowledge of animal behavior, terrain, and seasonal cycles was vital for survival, informing hunting strategies, migration routes, and resource management. Dietary adaptation was critical for humans and other omnivores. Early populations consumed a mix of meat, plants, and seasonal resources, adjusting their intake based on availability. Hunting large herbivores, such as mammoths and bison, provided essential protein and fat, while foraging for roots, berries, and other plant foods supplemented nutrition. Preservation techniques, including drying, smoking, or freezing food, allowed humans to survive periods when fresh resources were limited. These adaptive strategies illustrate a sophisticated understanding of environmental dynamics and resource management. Seasonal adaptation was a defining feature of life in the Ice Age. Winter brought extreme cold, limited daylight, and heavy snow cover, constraining access to food. Animals conserved energy through huddling, reduced activity, and migration. Humans developed storage techniques, adjusted clothing and shelters, and timed hunting and foraging to maximize efficiency. Summer, by contrast, offered abundant vegetation, melting streams, and easier travel. Reproduction, migration, and growth cycles were carefully synchronized with these seasonal rhythms, demonstrating the precision with which life responded to environmental constraints. Physiological adaptation complemented behavioral strategies. Animals developed increased fat layers, specialized fur, and changes in circulation to preserve warmth. Some herbivores, such as bison and caribou, developed large hooves to traverse snow, while predators adapted paw or claw structures for traction and hunting efficiency. Humans exhibited similar physical adaptations over generations, including endurance, thermoregulation, and dexterity, enabling them to navigate and survive in extreme conditions. The interaction between organisms and landscape also contributed to adaptation. Glacial terrain created both challenges and opportunities. Valleys and moraines offered shelter from wind and predators, while river networks provided water and food resources. Snowdrifts could impede travel, yet also concentrate herbivores in predictable locations, aiding predator hunting. Humans observed and exploited these patterns, integrating environmental knowledge into survival strategies, while animals evolved instinctive responses to recurring glacial conditions. Adaptation extended beyond individual species to the ecosystem as a whole. Herbivores influenced vegetation distribution through grazing, while predators regulated herbivore populations, maintaining ecological balance. Seasonal flooding, soil deposition, and glacial retreat created new habitats that were quickly colonized by plants and animals. Even microorganisms and insects adapted to cold conditions, contributing to nutrient cycling and supporting higher trophic levels. The ecosystem was a finely tuned network in which each adaptation, behavioral or physiological, played a role in the survival of the whole. The Pleistocene environment was not static. It was defined by change, uncertainty, and constant pressure to adapt. Glaciers advanced and retreated, rivers shifted course, and climate fluctuated over decades and centuries. Life persisted because it was capable of dynamic response. Adaptation was continuous, a process that shaped morphology, behavior, and strategy. Every species, from moss to mammoth, humans to wolves, reflected millions of years of evolution, fine-tuned to survive the rigors of cold and ice. Ultimately, the adaptations of Ice Age life were a testament to resilience. They demonstrate the interplay of physiology, behavior, and environmental awareness in sustaining survival under extreme conditions. Plants, animals, and humans coexisted in a complex, interdependent system, responding to glacial cycles, seasonal change, and ecological pressures. The story of adaptation in the Ice Age is not simply one of endurance, it is a story of evolution, innovation, and the profound capacity of life to persist and flourish in the face of relentless environmental challenges. The story of Ice Age North America is not complete without understanding the role of humans, whose presence, though relatively small in number, had a profound influence on the landscape and its ecosystems. These early populations were highly adaptive, navigating a continent dominated by glaciers, vast herds of megafauna, and extreme seasonal variation. Human survival depended on observation, knowledge, and skill, each generation learning to anticipate environmental changes and exploit available resources. Humans arrived in North America during the later stages of the Pleistocene, likely following migratory corridors along ice-free regions. They tracked animal movements, identified sources of water, and settled temporarily in areas that provided shelter and food. Mobility was central to their survival. Unlike modern sedentary societies, Ice Age humans were highly mobile, capable of covering vast distances to access seasonal resources. They learned to move with the rhythms of the land, adapting to shifting vegetation patterns, snow cover, and glacial advance and retreat. Hunting was a primary driver of human behavior, and strategies were remarkably sophisticated. Large herbivores, including mammoths, bison, and caribou, were central to their diet, providing protein, fat, hides, and bones for tools and shelter. Humans developed specialized hunting techniques, combining knowledge of animal behavior with cooperative tactics. Ambushes, drives, and coordinated attacks allowed small groups to take down prey many times larger than themselves. Timing was critical, with hunts often synchronized with seasonal migration or periods when animals were vulnerable due to ice, snow, or environmental conditions. Tools were essential for survival, reflecting ingenuity and adaptation. Stone, bone, and antler were crafted into weapons, cutting implements, and processing tools. Projectile points, scrapers, knives, and hammers allowed humans to hunt efficiently, prepare hides, and process food. Tools were often specialized for different prey, environmental conditions, and seasonal tasks. The development and transmission of tool-making knowledge enabled humans to adapt to diverse landscapes, from frozen tundra to glacial river valleys, maintaining a balance between survival needs and resource availability. Fire was another critical adaptation. It provided warmth, protection from predators, and the ability to cook food, increasing its nutritional value and digestibility. Fire also facilitated social cohesion, as groups gathered around flames, sharing information, planning hunts, and coordinating seasonal movements. The control and management of fire required observation, knowledge, and foresight, underscoring the cognitive sophistication of Ice Age humans in adapting to extreme environments. Shelter reflected human ingenuity and flexibility. In regions near glaciers, temporary structures were constructed from available materials, including wood, bones, hides, and ice. Shelters were designed to protect from wind, snow, and predators, while also allowing ventilation for fires. These structures were often portable or adaptable, accommodating seasonal movement while ensuring safety. Understanding the landscape and environmental conditions formed the design and placement of shelters, demonstrating humans' intimate knowledge of their surroundings. Human populations were organized socially, forming small groups with defined roles and responsibilities. Cooperation was essential for hunting. Knowledge was shared across generations, including understanding animal behavior, navigation, toll production, and environmental patterns. Social structures enabled humans to coordinate complex activities, maintain cohesion during migrations, and adapt collectively to environmental challenges. Humans also influenced the ecosystem, both intentionally and unintentionally. Hunting pressure affected the distribution and behavior of large herbivores, while the use of fire could alter vegetation patterns, encouraging the growth of certain plants and suppressing others. Campsites concentrated resources in specific areas, creating microhabits that attracted smaller animals and provided ecological feedback loops. Migration was guided by both necessity and opportunity. Humans followed animal herds, sought ice-free corridors, and exploited seasonal resources. Glacial margins, river valleys, and coastal plains provided pathways through otherwise inhospitable regions. Seasonal movement allowed humans to exploit diverse ecosystems, balancing the risks of cold and scarcity with the availability of water, food, and shelter. This mobility was a cornerstone of survival, reflecting the integration of observation, planning, and environmental knowledge. Dietary adaptation was equally important. Humans consumed a combination of large and small game, fish, plant resources, and seasonal offerings. Knowledge of edible plants, fungi, and roots complemented meat consumption, creating a diverse and reliable food base. Preservation techniques, including drying, smoking, and freezing, extended the availability of resources through harsh winters. Fat from large herbivores was especially important for energy during cold months, while hides and bones were repurposed for tools, clothing, and shelter, illustrating a holistic use of resources. The cognitive demands of Ice Age life were significant. Humans had to anticipate environmental change, plan hunting strategies, coordinate group activities, and innovate technological solutions. Seasonal cycles, glacial movement, and animal behavior all required careful observation and interpretation. This combination of skill, adaptability, and foresight allowed humans not only to survive, but to influence the landscapes and ecosystems they inhabited. Humans also interacted with predators and other species in complex ways. Knowledge of predator behavior was crucial, both for avoiding danger and for understanding competition for prey. Cooperative strategies allowed humans to exploit resources while minimizing risk. This balance between competition and coexistence reflects the sophisticated ecological understanding developed by early populations, highlighting the interplay between cognition, adaptation, and survival in extreme conditions. Even in the face of harsh climates, humans maintained cultural practices that reinforced group cohesion and survival. Tool-making, hunting, and shelter construction were accompanied by shared knowledge, oral traditions, and observation of natural patterns. This cultural dimension enhanced adaptability, allowing groups to respond collectively to environmental challenges. Survival was not merely an individual endeavor, but a product of shared knowledge, cooperation, and responsiveness to the rhythms of the Ice Age world. By the end of the Pleistocene, humans had established themselves as resilient and adaptable participants in the North American ecosystem. Their strategies for mobility, hunting, tool-making, fire management, and social organization allowed them to navigate one of the most extreme environments ever inhabited. Humans were not passive observers of glacial and ecological change. They were active agents, shaping and responding to the Ice Age landscape in ways that ensure survival, influenced other species, and laid the foundations for the complex interplay between humans and environment that continues into modern times. The story of Ice Age humans is a story of ingenuity, resilience, and adaptation. It illustrates the capacity of our species to survive and thrive in conditions of extreme cold, resource scarcity, and environmental uncertainty. Observing animal behavior, navigating glaciers and rivers, crafting tools, and organizing socially allowed humans to not only endure, but to leave a lasting mark on the ecosystems of Ice Age North America. Their presence underscores the profound interconnectedness of life during this epoch, revealing a world in which every adaptation, every decision, and every movement was part of a larger rhythm dictated by ice, wind, and the relentless cycles of nature. As the Pleistocene progressed, the glaciers that had dominated much of North America began to retreat. This retreat was neither uniform nor sudden. It occurred gradually over centuries, in response to long-term climatic warming. Ice sheets thinned, edges receded, and meltwater surged into newly formed rivers and lakes. The retreat of glaciers reshaped the continent, revealing landscapes long buried beneath frozen expanses and initiating profound ecological change. The melting of ice sheets transformed the physical environment. Valleys carved by glacial movement were filled with meltwater, forming lakes, wetlands, and meandering rivers. Sediment carried by ice and meltwater was deposited across floodplains, creating nutrient-rich soils that would support diverse vegetation. Moraines, drumlins, and glacial erratics remained as visible markers of ice coverage, providing insight into the immense scale of glacial sculpting. As ice withdrew, previously glaciated regions underwent dramatic changes in elevation, drainage, and soil composition, establishing new habitats for plants, animals, and humans. Vegetation responded rapidly to these changes. Pioneer species, including mosses, lichens, and hardy grasses, were among the first to colonize exposed ground. Their growth stabilized soil, retained moisture, and created conditions suitable for shrubs and early trees. Coniferous forests expanded into higher elevations: tundra, insulator, hope, rash. Inside, probing the new way from the road, is not more than 1 million pounds, but fueled by fields of clouds. Plant communities shifted in response to temperature, soil development, and water availability, creating a mosaic of habitats that would sustain herbivores and predators in the post-glacial landscape. Herbivores adapted quickly to these emerging ecosystems. Mammoths, bison, and caribou adjusted migratory routes in response to changing vegetation and water sources. Mastodons moved into newly forested areas, browsing on young trees and shrubs. The availability of fresh vegetation allowed populations to expand in some regions, while species unable to adjust faced increased mortality. Herbivore movements shaped plant communities, as grazing and browsing influenced the distribution, growth, and reproductive success of pioneer species. This feedback between plants and herbivores was a crucial driver of ecological succession. Predators followed herbivore distributions closely. Saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and other carnivores tracked shifting herds, adjusting territories and hunting strategies in response to the dynamic environment. Seasonal fluctuations in prey abundance influenced reproductive cycles, social behavior, and territory use. As herbivores spread into newly exposed landscapes, predators adapted to exploit new hunting opportunities while maintaining ecological balance. Competition among predator species further influenced population dynamics and spatial distribution. Human populations were deeply affected by glacial retreat. Ice-free corridors opened previously inaccessible regions, allowing expansion and migration. Humans exploited new resources, including vegetation, water, and animals, using knowledge gained over generations of observing glacial landscapes. Seasonal movements were timed to coincide with optimal availability of food and shelter. Hunting strategies adapted to new terrains, with humans learning to navigate rivers, floodplains, and forested valleys created by retreating ice. The retreat of glaciers provided opportunities as well as challenges, requiring observation, flexibility, and technological skill. Hydrology underwent dramatic transformation as glaciers melted. Large meltwater rivers surged across valleys, while temporary lakes formed behind moraines and ice dams. Some lakes persisted long after the glaciers receded, becoming ecological hubs for fish, amphibians, birds, and mammals. Wetlands developed in low-lying areas, supporting diverse plant communities and providing breeding grounds for numerous species. Seasonal flooding redistributed sediment, replenishing soils and creating fertile environments that encouraged ecological diversity. Water was a defining element of post-glacial landscapes, influencing both biological and human activity. The retreat of glaciers also affected climate, locally and regionally. The reflective ice surfaces diminished, allowing more sunlight to warm the land. Winds shifted as ice receded, altering patterns of snow deposition, temperature, and moisture. Glacial meltwater contributed to temporary cooling in some regions, but overall signaled a warming trend. This changing climate influenced the distribution of plants, herbivores, predators, and humans, creating conditions for rapid ecological succession and the development of new ecosystems. Interactions between species were critical in the post-glacial landscape. Herbivores shaped vegetation through grazing and browsing, while predators regulated herbivore populations, preventing overgrazing and maintaining ecosystem stability. Humans influenced animal distribution and plant communities through hunting and controlled use of fire. Even small species, including insects and microorganisms, played a role in nutrient cycling and soil development. The retreat of glaciers revealed a continent in flux, with ecological communities forming, dissolving, and reforming in response to environmental change. Soil formation was a fundamental consequence of glacial retreat. As ice receded, rocks ground by glaciers were deposited along with organic matter from decaying plants and animals. These deposits created fertile soils capable of supporting diverse vegetation. Over centuries, forests expanded, grasslands stabilized, and wetlands developed. Soil composition influenced water retention, vegetation types, and habitat suitability for herbivores and predators. This gradual transformation of land was essential in establishing the ecosystems that would define post-glacial North America. The retreat of ice sheets also created corridors for human expansion. Previously blocked by glacial barriers, humans were able to explore new regions, hunt newly accessible herds, and exploit diverse ecological niches. Ice-free valleys and river corridors provided routes for migration and settlement. Knowledge of animal behavior, water sources, and vegetation cycles was applied to these new environments. Human adaptability ensured survival and facilitated the expansion of populations across the continent. Ultimately, the retreat of the glaciers marked a turning point in North America's ecological and geological history. Landscapes were reshaped, ecosystems diversified, and species distributions changed permanently. Plants, herbivores, predators, and humans adapted to emerging habitats, demonstrating the resilience and adaptability of life in the face of profound environmental transformation. The retreat of the ice was not merely the end of a frozen epic. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the continent's history, laying the foundation for modern ecosystems and human development. The post-glacial world was one of dynamic transformation. Rivers carved new valleys, lakes formed in depressions, forests expanded into exposed terrain, and grasslands stabilized in fertile plains. Herbivores and predators adjusted to these changes, forming new ecological relationships. Humans navigated this shifting landscape, applying knowledge, skill, and social organization to thrive. The retreat of the ice illustrates the profound impact of climate and geology on the evolution of ecosystems, the adaptation of species, and the strategies required for survival in a world shaped by glaciers. Through millennia of change, the retreat of glaciers created a continent both renewed and resilient. The ecological succession that followed ice retreat illustrates the interdependence of life, landscape, and climate. Plants stabilized soils, herbivores shaped vegetation, predators maintained population balance, and humans adapted to exploit resources efficiently. The rhythm of glacial retreat and ecological response demonstrates that even in the most extreme conditions, life finds a way to persist, innovate, and flourish. The retreat of the glaciers transformed North America into a landscape of constant change, revealing new habitats and creating opportunities for life to reorganize. As ice withdrew, ecosystems shifted dramatically, responding to altered climate, water distribution, soil composition, and plant succession. This period was one of ecological renewal and rebalancing, where species adapted to new conditions and humans continued to expand their range across the continent. Vegetation led the transformation. Pioneer species, lichens, mosses, and hardy grasses, colonized bare ground left by retreating ice. These early colonizers stabilized soil, retained moisture, and facilitated the growth of shrubs and early trees. Over time, coniferous forests advanced into higher elevations, while deciduous trees spread across valleys and lowlands. Wetlands developed in depressions and along river margins, providing crucial habitats for amphibians, birds, and small mammals. Plant communities expanded and diversified, responding to temperature, soil fertility, water availability, and competition, creating a patchwork of ecological niches. Herbivores followed closely behind these advancing plant communities. Large grazers, such as mammoths and bison, moved into open plains where grasses flourished. Mastodons favored newly forested regions, browsing young trees and shrubs, while smaller herbivores exploited the variety of niches emerging in wetlands, riversides, and meadows. These herbivores played a key role in shaping vegetation, influencing seed dispersal, growth patterns, and plant succession. Grazing and browsing maintained the dynamic balance of early post-glacial ecosystems. Predators adapted to the shifting distribution of prey. Saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and other carnivores adjusted territories to follow migrating herbivores, exploiting changes in landscape and habitat availability. Seasonal movements dictated reproductive cycles, hunting strategies, and territorial boundaries. Predator-prey interactions continued to influence the distribution of species, maintaining ecological stability even as the environment underwent dramatic transformation. Smaller species also played critical roles in ecosystem shifts. Rodents, insects, and amphibians colonized wetlands, floodplains, and forest edges, participating in nutrient cycling and pollination. Birds exploited expanding forests, wetlands, and river corridors, contributing to seed dispersal and insect copulation control. Microorganisms enriched soil fertility, supporting plant growth and contributing to ecosystem resilience. These smaller, often overlooked species ensured the functionality of post-glacial ecosystems, highlighting the interdependence of all life forms. Humans were active participants in these shifting ecosystems. As glaciers retreated, new corridors opened for migration, settlement, and hunting. Human groups exploited diverse habitats, tracking herbivore movements, exploiting new plant resources, and establishing temporary camps. Knowledge of seasonal cycles, water sources, and animal behavior guided expansion into formerly inaccessible regions. Early humans adapted to changing vegetation and prey distributions, adjusting hunting strategies, tool production, and mobility in response to environmental shifts. Fire management became an increasingly important human adaptation. Controlled burns encouraged the growth of edible plants, stimulated regrowth in forests and grasslands, and attracted herbivores to specific areas. This selective use of fire shaped plant communities and influenced herbivore behavior, creating predictable hunting opportunities. Humans integrated observation, experimentation, and knowledge transmission into these practices, demonstrating the sophisticated understanding of ecological dynamics required to thrive in a post-glacial environment. Water continued to play a central role in shaping ecosystems. Rivers and lakes formed by glacial retreat provided habitat for fish, amphibians, and aquatic plants. Wetlands retained seasonal water, supporting birds, insects, and mammals. Floodplains, enriched by sediment deposition, encouraged rapid plant growth. Seasonal variation in water availability influenced species distributions, migration patterns, and reproductive cycles. Humans, herbivores, and predators alike relied on these aquatic resources, integrating them into survival strategies and ecological interactions. The dynamic post-glacial landscape required constant adaptation. Plant communities shifted in response to soil development, climate change, and herbivore pressure. Herbivores adjusted grazing, browsing, and migratory behavior to match vegetation growth. Predators tracked prey, modifying hunting strategies according to seasonal and environmental conditions. Humans integrated these patterns into technological and social strategies, ensuring survival in a changing world. The interplay of species and landscape created a complex, adaptive system where life responded continuously to opportunity and challenge. Climate influenced the pace and direction of ecosystem change. Warming temperatures allowed temperate forests to expand northward, while tundra persisted in higher latitudes. Seasonal cycles dictated plant growth, herbivore movement, and predator strategies. Extreme weather events, including storms and early winter snow, tested the resilience of species and human populations, shaping behavior, reproduction, and survival. The gradual stabilization of post-glacial climates provided a framework for longer-term ecological succession and human adaptation. Human innovation complemented natural adaptation. Toolmaking, fire use, clothing, and shelter construction allowed humans to exploit diverse habitats effectively. Hunting strategies were refined to match the new distribution of herbivores, while foraging took advantage of expanding plant diversity. Knowledge was transmitted across generations, ensuring continuity and adaptability in rapidly changing ecosystems. Humans became integrated participants in the post-glacial landscape, shaping ecological patterns while responding to environmental constraints. The retreat of glaciers and subsequent ecosystem shifts highlight the interconnectedness of life in Ice Age North America. Plant colonization stabilized soil, facilitated habitat formation, and supported herbivores. Herbivores influenced vegetation through grazing and browsing, shaping plant succession. Predators regulated herbivore populations, maintaining ecological balance. Humans applied observation, technology, and social organization to navigate these shifting ecosystems. Smaller species, from insects to amphibians, maintained nutrient cycles and contributed to ecological resilience. Together, these interactions illustrate a dynamic, adaptive, and interconnected system responding to glacial retreat and environmental change. By the end of the post-glacial period, North America had transformed from a frozen, glaciated continent to a mosaic of forests, grasslands, wetlands, and river systems. Flora and fauna had redistributed in response to new habitats, and humans had adapted to exploit these changes successfully. The shifting ecosystems of this period illustrate the interplay between geological processes, climate change, and life's adaptive capacity. Every species, from the smallest plant to the largest predator, contributed to the formation of complex ecological networks that defined the post-glacial landscape. The story of shifting ecosystems demonstrates resilience, adaptation, and the continuous negotiation of life with environmental change. Post-glacial North America became a stage for dynamic interactions between species and landscape. Humans, herbivores, predators, and plants all participated in these processes, ensuring that the continent remained biologically rich, diverse, and capable of sustaining life, even as the ice receded. As the Pleistocene drew to a close, North America's iconic megafauna faced unprecedented challenges. Woolly mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths had dominated the landscape for millennia, shaping ecosystems through their sheer presence, behavior, and feeding habits. Yet as glaciers retreated and climates warmed, these giants encountered rapidly changing environments, intensified competition, and increasing pressure from human populations. The final chapter of the Ice Age would see the gradual disappearance of these extraordinary creatures, leaving behind only fossil records and enduring ecological legacies. Climate change played a central role in the decline of megafauna. Warming temperatures altered vegetation patterns, transforming open steppe and tundra into forests and wetlands. Grazing grounds for mammoths diminished, while mastodons faced reductions in suitable browsing habitats. Seasonal availability of water and food fluctuated unpredictably, creating stress on populations accustomed to the stability of glacial cycles. Harsh winters still occurred, but the overall rhythm of the environment had shifted, disrupting migratory routes, reproduction timing, and herd cohesion. These environmental pressures expose vulnerabilities that had previously been mitigated by adaptation and mobility. Human influence intensified these stresses. Early populations, skilled in hunting large herbivores, became increasingly efficient in exploiting these animals. Coordinated hunts, use of fire, and sophisticated tools allowed humans to target vulnerable individuals, such as the young, old, or infirm. Even modest human populations could have a significant impact on megafauna due to the slow reproductive rates and long gestation periods of these giants. Predation pressure from humans added to the challenges posed by climate change, creating a dual threat that accelerated population declines across the continent. Disease may also have contributed to the decline of large animals. Changing climates, increased density of populations in shrinking suitable habitats, and interactions with other species could have facilitated the spread of pathogens. Though difficult to verify from fossil evidence, the possibility of disease adds another layer of complexity to understanding the disappearance of North America's megafauna. Combined with environmental stress and human hunting, disease may have tipped the balance, pushing species past the threshold of survival. Megafauna populations responded with adaptation where possible. Mammoths and mastodons shifted ranges in search of suitable forage, moving to higher latitudes or altitudes where vegetation persisted. Herds changed migratory patterns, attempting to track remaining open steppe and tundra. Predators adjusted hunting strategies to follow declining prey populations, while smaller herbivores filled the gaps left behind by the loss of larger species. However, adaptation was constrained by the speed of environmental change and the cumulative pressures of predation, competition, and habitat fragmentation. The decline of megafauna had cascading effects on ecosystems. Grazing patterns altered, influencing plant community composition and succession. Open plains and tundra slowly converted to forests and wetlands, changing the availability of resources for remaining herbivores and predators. Predator populations adjusted to the disappearance of large prey, shifting to smaller animals, all facing local decline. Nutrient cycling was altered as the large-scale foraging and movement of megafauna diminished, affecting soil composition, seed dispersal, and the balance of ecological processes. The extinction of these giants reshaped North America's ecological structure in profound and lasting ways. Humans observed and responded to the decline of these large animals. Hunting strategies were modified to target remaining species, including bison and smaller herbivores. Humans adapted to shifting landscapes, moving into new areas opened by glacial retreat or newly established forests and grasslands. Knowledge transmission became crucial as prey availability changed, and social cooperation allowed groups to exploit resources efficiently despite environmental uncertainty. The interplay between human ingenuity and ecological change illustrates the significant role humans played in the final stages of the Ice Age. Fossil evidence provides insight into the timing and nature of megafauna decline, Skeletal remains, preserved in sediments, reveal signs of hunting, injury, and disease. Patterns of extinction are uneven across regions, suggesting localized pressures combined with broader climatic trends. Some species persisted longer in refugia, areas where suitable habitat remained relatively stable, while others vanished rapidly as conditions shifted. The fossil record captures a complex picture of gradual loss, punctuated by sudden collapses linked to environmental and anthropogenic pressures. Despite the decline, megafauna continued to influence post-glacial landscapes until their final disappearance. Mammoth herds, for example, maintained open grasslands through grazing, while mastodons shaped forest composition through browsing. Predators continued to regulate herbivore populations, maintaining ecological balance. Even in decline, these species played critical roles in ecosystem function, demonstrating that extinction is not merely a final event, but a process with lasting ecological consequences. The extinction of Ice Age giants was a defining moment in North American natural history. It marked the end of a dynamic period characterized by glaciers, megafauna, and human expansion. The disappearance of mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, and other large species reshaped ecological communities, opening niches for smaller herbivores, predators, and plants. Humans persisted, adapting to the new post-glacial environment and capitalizing on opportunities created by the absence of these enormous competitors. The Ice Age gave way to a world more familiar to modern ecosystems, but one forever shaped by the legacy of the giants that had roamed the continent. This period underscores the delicate balance between species, environment, and climate. The decline of megafauna illustrates the interconnected pressures of environmental change, human activity, and biological limitations. Survival was determined not only by adaptation, but by the ability to cope with multiple, simultaneous stresses. The extinction of these giants serves as a reminder of the vulnerability of even the most formidable species to rapid and compounding environmental challenges, highlighting the complexity of ecological systems and the role of humans as active participants in shaping them. Ultimately, the story of the last giants is a story of transition. North America shifted from a landscape dominated by immense herbivores and apex predators to one increasingly influenced by smaller, more adaptable species and human activity. Ecosystems were restructured, and the rhythms of life adjusted to the absence of the Ice Age's largest inhabitants. The legacy of these creatures endures in fossilized remains, in the structure of modern ecosystems, and in the imprint they left on human culture and survival strategies. Their extinction marks both an end and a transformation, a final chapter in the Ice Age that reshaped the continent forever. The Ice Age left an enduring legacy across North America, visible in its landscapes, ecosystems, and the species that continue to inhabit the continent. Though glaciers have long since disappeared, their influence remains etched in valleys, moraines, and riverbeds. Lakes formed by glacial retreat still dot the northern plains, while rivers once guided by ice now sustain vast forests, wetlands, and fertile plains. These features provide a window into the Pleistocene, a record of how ice, water, and life shaped the land over millennia. Fossil evidence allows modern scientists to reconstruct this world. Mammoth skeletons, mastodon tusks, and the remains of giant sloths reveal the scale and diversity of Ice Age fauna. Saber-toothed cat skulls and dire wolf teeth show the predatory dynamics of ancient ecosystems. Plant fossils, pollen grains, and soil strata indicate vegetation patterns and climate conditions, illustrating how ecosystems responded to glacial advance and retreat. Together, these records provide insight into the relationships between species, climate, and landscape, revealing the delicate balance that sustained life during the Ice Age. Humans also left their mark. Archaeological sites, stone tools, and remnants of shelters demonstrate how early populations adapted to extreme conditions. Evidence of hunting strategies, including large game drives and butchering sites, shows the sophistication of early human ecological knowledge. Tools crafted from stone, bone, and antler illustrate technological ingenuity, while patterns of settlement reveal migration routes shaped by climate, water, and vegetation. These artifacts allow us to understand the deep interconnection between humans and their environment, highlighting adaptation as both a survival strategy and a driver of ecological change. The Ice Age shaped modern biodiversity. Many plant and animal lineages trace their distribution and adaptation to Pleistocene conditions. Species that survive the retreat of glaciers carry genetic adaptations for cold tolerance, seasonal migration, and resource variability. Ecosystems that formed in response to glacial landscapes, forests, grasslands, wetlands, persist today, maintaining the legacy of Ice Age ecological processes. Even extinct megafauna indirectly influenced the structure of post-glacial ecosystems, leaving niches that smaller species, including humans, would fill. The interplay of extinction, adaptation, and ecological succession created the foundation of modern North American environments. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands continue to reflect Ice Age hydrology. Glacial melt shaped drainage systems that remain fundamental to ecosystems, agriculture, and human settlement. Fertile soils deposited by glaciers support forests and grasslands, sustaining diverse flora and fauna. Wetlands formed in glacial depressions provide habitat for birds, amphibians, and aquatic species. The persistence of these features highlights the enduring influence of glacial processes on both natural systems and human civilization. The land itself is a living record of Ice Age dynamics, offering insight into past climates and guiding understanding of ecological resilience. The legacy of adaptation is profound. Plants, herbivores, predators, and humans all demonstrate the enduring importance of flexibility, observation, and innovation. Species that thrived during the Ice Age evolved physiological traits, behaviors, and strategies suited to extreme conditions. Humans developed technological and social adaptations that allowed them to exploit diverse habitats, track prey, and survive environmental fluctuations. These adaptations illustrate a continuity of survival strategy, emphasizing the interconnection between biological evolution, ecological pressures, and cultural ingenuity. The extinction of megafauna also left a lasting ecological imprint. As giant herbivores disappeared, vegetation patterns shifted, predator-prey dynamics changed, and nutrient cycles were altered. Humans and smaller animals filled the voids left by these giants, adapting to newly available habitats and resources. The loss of Ice Age megafauna reshaped ecosystems in ways that persist today, influencing species distributions, vegetation patterns, and even soil composition. Understanding these changes underscores the profound impact of extinction and environmental transformation on long-term ecological development. Modern North America bears cultural reflections of the Ice Age as well. Indigenous peoples and later populations have recognized the significance of landscapes shaped by glaciers and rivers. Fossilized bones and archaeological evidence inform oral histories, traditional knowledge, and scientific understanding. Museums, research institutions, and conservation programs preserve and study this heritage, linking present communities to deep ecological and cultural histories. The Ice Age is not merely a period of the distant past. It is a continuing influence of sounds and faces of life, work to be real. What we have humans understand, is it not merely a continuing influence on how humans understand, interact with, and conserve their environment? Climate studies also benefit from Ice Age legacies. Glacial deposits, sediment layers, and fossilized plant and animal remains provide baseline data for understanding long-term climate variability. Scientists study these records to predict environmental responses to modern climate change, offering insights into resilience, adaptation, and ecosystem stability. The lessons of the Ice Age, including species responses to warming, migration, and habitat shifts, provide guidance for conservation, resource management, and ecological planning in the present day. The past becomes a lens through which we interpret and prepare for the future. Ultimately, the legacy of the Ice Age is a story of transformation, resilience, and continuity. North America's landscapes, ecosystems, and species were molded by glaciers, climate shifts, and the dynamic interplay of life. Humans, observing, adapting, and innovating, became active participants in these processes. The Pleistocene left an indelible mark on the continent, one that endures in geological features, ecological patterns, and the cultural understanding of human and natural history. It reminds us that adaptation, cooperation, and respect for environmental rhythms are essential to survival in any epoch. The Ice Age legacy is both ecological and philosophical. It teaches the importance of interconnectedness, the impact of environmental change on survival, and the enduring consequences of adaptation and extinction. Plants, animals, and humans coexisted in complex systems, each responding to and shaping the environment. The resilience displayed by species in the face of ice, cold, and scarcity highlights the capacity of life to endure extreme conditions, innovate, and persist. In this way, the Ice Age continues to influence the present, offering lessons on survival, adaptation, and the profound relationship between life and landscape. In reflecting on the Ice Age, it becomes clear that the epoch was more than a period of glacial coverage and frozen landscapes. It was a time of ecological experimentation, evolutionary pressure, and human ingenuity. Species adapted or vanished, landscapes transformed, and humans emerged as both observers and agents of environmental change. The legacy of this period endures in the distribution of species, the structure of ecosystems, and the human understanding of survival in the face of adversity. The Ice Age is a reminder of the enduring power of nature and the adaptability of life in all its forms. The continent that emerged from the Ice Age is a testament to these processes. Glacial valleys, rivers, lakes, and soils remain as evidence of environmental sculpting. Forests and grasslands reflect the persistence of post-glacial succession. Humans continue to inhabit, utilize, and study these landscapes, drawing knowledge and inspiration from the Ice Age. By examining the fossil record, ecological patterns, and human adaptations, modern society gains a deeper appreciation of the complex interplay between life and environment. The legacy of the Ice Age is, therefore, both a story of the past and a guide for the future, illustrating the enduring lessons of adaptation, resilience, and ecological interconnectedness.